being an election judge. So I'm going to go over some basics, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. But sometimes it's better to just go over the basics. So people hear about the word election judge. What is it? Well, it's that person who works in the polling place on election day, upholding the laws, voter registration, helping people in regards to casting their ballot. When the polls close, we have precinct optical scan all paper ballots. So when the polls close on election night, they help to close it out. So they open the polling place, close the polling place, and then during the day, they work that process. So you can work registration, you can work with the ballots, a variety of jobs that there are as an election judge. It takes a team, and state law requires Warren County at that time. And so that law also says that it's a list when you sign up before May 1st, the party, and it can be local or the state party, sends a list to either our local administrators or to the Secretary of State office. And then the local units of government who do the actual appointing of election judges and the whole process with that, they have to choose first from that list. And only after they exhausted that list can they go to other lists or other people that they may have. And so it's really important for us here in Wright County in particular, but any county across the state of Minnesota, is to see to it that there is a sufficient number of Republican election judges to serve not only on election day in every precinct, but also the 46 days before election day when absentee voting starts. Now we need election judges to do both. And that 46 days when you sign up there is to be available Monday through Friday and the weekend before the election as well. But that isn't 8 hours a day. It'll be maybe 1 hour twice a week in the first week and maybe 2 hours twice a week the second week, and so on as you go forward. And then those election judges work with those who are doing the absentee ballots, the process of accepting them, meaning they fulfilled all the legal qualifications, or rejecting them, meaning they're deficient, they don't meet the qualifications. And there are a number of issues to that. Good thing to know is that you need to volunteer. It's what I did. One of the first things I did, the best part I ever found of being in the election system was being in the polling place on election day. On election day is so American. It's where you come to cast your ballot. It's actually the day when the people govern. So when the people govern on election day or absentee ballots through those 46 days, those 46 days, by the way, are set because of our military and voters overseas, so the uniformed overseas voters. So that's why the 46 days to have time for the mail to get back. And when you realize that on election day, that is when America governs. They elect representatives who then go after that, and a smaller group of people, such as I am, a state senator, state representative. Those are the two categories, or the constitutional officers, governor, attorney general, secretary of state, and the state auditor. Then in place of you, because you chose those people, then during those next 2 years, or in the case of a state senator, 4 years, or U.S. senator, 6 years, they act on your behalf. That is the concept. Of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's election day. And so we need election judges to do that. I did that, and it's one of the most satisfying things, because you see elderly people and walkers, you see dads, I gotta get to work, okay, let me get through this line here, I gotta get to work, mom's going to work. You come in with babies during the day, all variety of people, all sorts that are coming into polling places all across the state of Minnesota. But that system counts on having those election judges. Now, why do we have that by party, Republican and Democrat? It's a check and a balance. It's a check, Republican to Democrat. It's a balance of them on behalf of you, the people. So you are well served when you have partisan election judges doing this process, because then you have that opportunity to say, okay, Democrats will make sure the Republicans are doing it right, Republicans make sure Democrats are doing it right, and together in the polling place, that is good for Minnesotans. So that's the whole purpose of having an election judge. Now, prior to that day, when you take up your duties, which is a 2-year term, by the way, prior to that election day, you will also have an opportunity to be trained, to be an election judge, to be trained, whether it's an absentee voting process on a ballot board or whether it's in the precinct on election day. You would receive specific training for that. And so for that, you would get your mileage and you get your time of training. And when you serve as an election judge, whether it's absentee ballot board or on election day, again, your mileage and also the hours by which you work. The polls will open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Generally, the earliest is about 6 o'clock. You show up to start the day. And at night, because we have the precinct optical scan, when I was an election judge, we would hand count after the polls closed, the actual ballots, all of the votes on the ballots. So now we have a precinct optical scan, which takes the paper ballot. You hand mark the ovals on those paper ballots, and then the precinct optical scanner, if some of you remember, if you went to school, they might have used them. Those are then the machines, it's an optical scan, so it recognizes those ovals and then counts those ballots. And by the way, after the polls close on election day, every single county has at least 2 precincts that do a hand counting to see if the machine functioned right on election day. Those are randomly chosen after election day, within a week or so, before the canvassing board. And so those are kinds of the process. It's really a process and it's a system. And all parts of the system need to function right. But what I've always focused on is the first part is Republican election judges, Democrat election judges working together. And for that, we need volunteers. Now you volunteer, but you do get a little pay for it. I was so shocked when I got a paycheck. I didn't know that was part of the deal. I'd have been glad to do it if I didn't get paid, because the whole process of an election system being conducted with transparency and accuracy is just so critically important that I think to do that. So I appreciate the fact that you are here today, you have an interest, appreciate that so much. Thank you so much to Dan and the volunteers here with their laptops. They will help you to actually go into the Republican Party website. And this is a website where the design of it I worked on 2 years ago. And I appreciate the fact that our chair, David Hann, and deputy chair, Donna Bergstrom, in particular, are really supporting this, really getting behind it and providing resources for it. But the one thing they can't do, they need you to do, and that is to sign up. So just so you know, you'll get that help, you'll get that support. And those are the 2 areas, both on election day and then on the 46 days before. If you can be available for that. Again, you're not committing to 46 days, 8 hours a day at all. You're committing to being available for whatever hours and times that is happening, and working with your county election official to be able to do that with them, and you'd have special training for that as well. So that's an overview of what an election judge is, your training, what you all do. I'm not going to go into the details of it, by the way. I won't at all, because I think that you need to, it's so much detail, that's not what today is about. Maybe sometime in the future I can do a little bit more. But one of the things I did was, many years ago, I did actually a video. You want to know how old it is? It's done on a VCR. But I did the 4 principles of a strong election system: access, accuracy, integrity, and privacy. I'm adding a 5th one this year, and that's called transparency. Because lately I have seen so disappointed in 2020, where people were shut out of the county offices, where things were done and nobody from outside could observe, contrary to state law, claiming that somehow COVID made any observers a danger to them, even though many were willing to do whatever it took, PPE, masks, whatever it took, so that they could observe. But it happened on a surprise on that night, and I was not able, some of them I was able to get opened up and some not. It just came too late. But I am working now with both the state party chair and with county auditors across the state to help be sure that we do have transparency. Have to remember, this is not a county election, federal election, a state election. This is the people's election. It belongs to the people. And you have a right to have transparency in this process so that you can ascertain to yourself. That's the whole concept of an election system in a country that has a republic and has democratic principles as part of that as well. You've got to have a transparent election process. So I would be glad now to answer any questions or any other areas that you'd like to go in regards to being an election judge. George.
You mentioned that the county people that go to the county, they come every couple of days, and not every day when the mail comes?
It all depends upon, they often, if they only have 1 or 2 absentee ballots that come in that first week or two, remember they only send them out 46 days before. So it takes a little while for the mail to come back. So the first week it might be, so they'll wait and accumulate a few of them or enough of them, then they'll call people in and then they'll do that process. But of course, as it goes on, there'll be more and more as well. Yeah. I'm hoping though, by the way, voting on election day in your precinct is the best place to vote. The most help, the most security, the most accuracy. It is the best thing. Absentee balloting is really for those who cannot go to the precinct on election day. That's always been the case. It is still solid. It is still good to follow that through. Election day is the best day to do that. If you're an election judge, by the way, in a precinct that is not your own, then you would want to go into the county office ahead of time and cast your ballot. That's an absolute legitimate reason for doing an absentee ballot. But do it in person at the county headquarters so that you're able to have that assistance, that help, and they can accept it, reject it, process it right there while you're standing there. So if something is not right, they can make it right while you're standing in front of the county election administrators. So if you're working in a precinct, then you can, by the way, you can be an election judge in your own precinct, in a neighboring precinct, or in another county. So the big thing is to have plenty who sign up, and then we can spread them out as needed. Good question, George. Thank you. Yes, Tom.
So I'm speaking to what George said. I think that he's talking about being on the election board, correct?
Yes,
as opposed to election
judge.
The absentee
judge. Ballot board.
Yeah.
Only the absentee ballot board has that 46 days availability to work on that board. Other election judges only work on election day, but you could possibly do both.
Yes.
All right, so if you're available when you're signing up today, they'll ask you the question, some of those kinds of questions, so we kind of know who is available for those 46 days, and there are other people by their work, family, many reasons, who say, I can set apart November 8th. November 8th, and right now, even before you are called to be an election judge, go ahead and take that date and just say that day, I am saving that whole day. If you can, work the whole day. It is amazing when you open and then you close to see the entire system, the entire process. And you can bring your own food with you. Many times volunteers will provide hot dishes, of course. What could be more Minnesota than hot dish on election day? But don't count on that. They'll usually let you know. Sometimes they'll bring in, subs or other food like that as well. Depends upon where you are, but be self-sufficient. Bring your beverages, bring whatever you need that day to be on your own just in case. Anything else? Yes.
If you're,
you're sitting next to each other.
So if you only have some availability on that 46 days prior, if you can help like specific times of the days, is there an option for that, or is it, if you work
So the question
hours?
is, what if you can't be available on all those times? Yes, you can still sign up and do that. That's why we need a group of people for Wright County or Sherburne County or whatever county it is. Need enough of them so that you can call the list, and if one cannot, then you can go to the next one and so on and so forth. Or if you can contact them and say, I'm available for these hours during those 46 days. If you need me as an election judge, those are the hours I'm available. I always kind of find it both. Don't just be passive and sit back and wait. Initiate, kind of thing. Your question?
I'm really confused about the mail-in ballot opposed to the absentee ballots. Are mail-in ballots legal in the state of Minnesota?
Well, there's two kinds of mail ballots. So you have the absentee ballots,
Right.
which you apply for.
Right.
And then you get the ballot back, and then you send it in, and then it's processed. That's what the ballot board does, okay? Mail-in usually are townships where they don't have a precinct polling place other than the township hall itself, okay, the town hall. So the town hall then would be a place where, say, you have nothing but mail, only mail. You don't have an actual precinct polling place. And by the way, that is decided by the townships, and it is reversible. If any of you live in a township and you happen to know that they're not doing in the precinct type of voting, they don't have a precinct polling place, you can petition the county, you can ask the county clerk, ask them how you can reverse that so that you go back to having a precinct polling place for election day rather than an all-mail where it's not your choice. So once a township has decided it, you can, by the way, always vote an absentee ballot. Even in those township places where you have all-mail, you can still use an absentee ballot to go in person to the county office and cast your ballot in that process in person, no matter what your township mail balloting is doing. Another question? Sure.
So 2020, my brother that lives in a group home received 2 applications for a ballot. And I was wondering if that is still going to be legal in the state of Minnesota.
Well, here's where we run into a limitation of that. The big thing is, yes, there was a flood of people who received these applications in the mail, sometimes pre-filled. Right now, there's bills in both the House and the Senate that would say that are putting restrictions on that. Not that they cannot do it, it's a free speech issue there, but that if they do them, they have to apply signage. This is not an official ballot, not sent by government office. They can't make the ballot look like an official ballot. Certain qualifiers, it was kind of a happening in 2020.
Yeah.
But the goal is to stop the abuse of that process, and in particular to stop them from pre-filling, using some sort of list from somewhere. There were many inaccuracies with that caused a lot of confusion, and addresses that were wrong, just a whole variety of things that were really problematic about that. So that's one of the bills that we're going to try and put some structure around that to stop the abuses of that. But it was a phenomenon of 20, so now we'll hopefully pass that law and be able to corral some of that and give greater clarity to you. Local election administrators, the counties, cities, and townships want that. It's a bipartisan effort. We want to get this done. So I'm hoping that that's one of the things that does get signed into law this year.
He received those applications, and he was, he's got he's a mental disability, and he was all upset and confused, like, oh, I need to go vote. I need to fill this out and go vote.
Right. Does he have a court order? By the way, some of you may not know this, but if you have parents who have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, maybe have a guardianship, power of attorney, variety of things like that, something that demonstrates that they don't have the mental capacity to cast a ballot, you can go to a court situation and request that the judge review that, both on medical and legal grounds. So if any of you are guardians or know people who are guardians or have power of attorney or things like that, I have a sister in that situation, and the group home contacted me and my sister to say, should they take her to vote or would we? My sister has a mental capacity of about a 3-year-old. She absolutely has no capacity to understand anything, but she's very compliant, and if you tell her to do something, she will do it. She's wonderful in that way. She's a cheerful, loving, wonderful person to care for. But then I went ahead and, as a guardian, I then requested of the judge to review her records, her medical records and other things, and determine whether she should have the ability to vote or have the court restrict that, as was done, by the way, in her original guardianship. It was done that way. But then a law was changed, so now it had to be done again. And so I did that, and I was able to have the court apply that to her record in regards to her being challenged by virtue of a court order. So if some of you have that kind of a situation, group homes, mental incapacity by whatever reason it may, whatever age it may be, just let me know and I'll be glad to help you. My office number is 651-296-5655. I consider that a constituent issue, that I can give you information about that and help you if needed with any of your family members or folks that you just want information about. Anybody else?
Give me that number again.
651-296-5655.
I just have two questions. So if you're going to be an election judge, the time commitment would be on the days of the election and possibly a day for training, is that correct? Or is there more than that?
No, availability for an election judge is a day, and not even a whole day, takes a half a day at most. I think 2 hours of training, the time it takes you to get there and home again.
Okay.
A half a day. Election day, working on election day can be a half a day or a whole day. Encourage you to do a whole day if you can. And then to let them know your availability for the absentee ballot board in regards to that as well. And that is more spotty, kind of a crescendo, starting out slow and then building into a greater volume. But your availability would be important to give them the days and the times that you're available for that. Yes.
Mary, is that you're available for 2 years if you get trained? Is that correct?
Well, usually the absentee ballot boards are primarily on a general election day. The other election days are usually done by municipals, such as the city.
Right.
And it depends upon your county, depends upon your city. Minneapolis does it on the odd year, so it would be 2023, so it would make a difference there. So local elections, it varies greatly,
Okay.
but most of all, it's a 2-year span of time. It means you're eligible to be called to serve as an election judge in any election that occurs during those next 2 years. And then for the 24 election, you need to sign up again, renew your request again to be on that party list. So once you start it, you just want to be sure that 2 years later, you do so again. And there is great value. I became a head election judge, and that actually turned out to be significant value to me. I found the whole election process fascinating because of being an election judge. And that led to that training video about being an election judge. And then that led to 1 year was kind of slow. And I always believed that if you were paying me, I would do something to benefit my bosses, right? The township I was in at the time. So after I'd finished cleaning and straightening and doing everything I could possibly think of, I said, what else can I do that would give value to the people here? So I saw this copy was a 3-ring binder of 12 chapters of election law. Well, I was slow enough that day that I read through it twice. And then the second time I put little sticky notes on the juicy spots. My father, who was a tax preparer and accountant, he would read tax code books in the evening. And he'd tell my mom would tell me this. He would say, hey, Tess, listen to this. And he'd read a juicy tidbit out of the tax code books. My mom said, I'm so glad your dad cares about that. And for all the customers that he had. I am too, and I'm my father's daughter, I guess. So I didn't know that story until after I had done that and told my mom about it, how fascinated I was about it. And so she said, well, that reminds me of your dad. Anybody else?
Just out of curiosity, when a local, whether it's township or not township, but city or county, when they choose their election judges, do do they have to do it on a partisan basis equally if possible? Or can they just take a list and pick one side?
State law requires them to do it on a partisan basis.
Do they do it?
Do they do it publicly? Is that what you're gonna ask?
Do they do it in a partisan
You know what,
basis?
I don't, asking,
Equally.
we have about 1,800 or so townships in the state of Minnesota. But those of you who live in a township, contact your your township supervisors, or go in and talk to your township clerk and say, I'd like to have some information about how you choose election judges and this state law that requires you to choose from the party list, because I'm from, and you name your political party, and say, I want to be sure that I fulfill that. I want to sign up directly with you. I'm from a political party. The state law requires from a party list. So usually I say it's better if your county, your House district or Senate district, however your party is organized, that official, whoever's the chair of that, or the state Republican Party, gets that list to those locals like a township, a county, or a city, okay, to make sure they have it. I have tried to pass a law that would say, once they're appointed, that the list of Republican election judges would go to the state Republican Party, Democrats to the Democrat Party. But I can't get that law passed either by Dayton or by Governor Walz, or supported by the House Democrats either. So I'm like, there's more than one way to get the job done. So we're going to do both now. State party to the Secretary of State, to the local units of government, and all of you signing up at state party, but then also going through your county party. And Dan, where's Dan?
You stepped up.
Okay, so Dan Schoenhardt is the Wright County Chair. Dan, as a party leader here in Wright County, he can take everybody who signed up and also send it directly out to the county, to the cities, and to the townships. Now we know what names they have, and those folks should be called to serve as an election judge. Now, if they have so many, they might not get to needing you, but they certainly ought to have enough to choose to meet the needs of Wright County. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, I was just wondering who polices that, the
Basically,
counties?
you, the citizens, local folks, there is no watchdog or anything to that, except the local Republican Party should work with the local unit of government. So that's what I do up in Sherburne County. I work with the county election official, and I encourage Dan and everybody else that is here in Wright County, go directly to your cities, townships, and your county. You're a resident of one of those, and so they should be paying attention to you, answering your questions, talking with you. You're going to learn a lot as well. When you go do that, I learned so much. Later on, when I ran for Secretary of State, I considered those 11 years being an actual election judge so valuable to me as Secretary of State. It really, really was important, and I was in it and worked it for those 11 years. Very, very valuable. Sir.
So there was a recent lawsuit that was brought up before the Supreme Court that was, I think you already know the one that I'm going to be referencing, over 0 is a valid number.
Well, the Minnesota Voters Alliance in a court case in regards to election judges for the ballot board.
Okay.
So the law itself is written in such a way, the intention was they would first choose for the absentee ballot board the election judges from the party list. When they exhausted that, they would go to use other lists. But what's happening is they're just not doing the party list, and they're just going to appointing other people. And so that's why the lawsuit came. But the court said it's just enough vague that they felt they couldn't give the relief that the Minnesota Voter Alliance wanted, that direct order. But one thing in the written opinion, though, did say, one thing is clear, that election judges must be used for signature matching or for that particular part of the verification of the absentee balloting process, of accepting and rejecting and making sure there's compliance with legal requirements. They must use election judges for that part. That cannot be done by anybody other than partisan election judges and in balance with each other. So that piece is really important. So though they didn't in the court case get the specific kind of relief that they might have wanted, but in this particular area, the judge was explicitly clear that that does require party balance of election judges, not deputy staff, not deputy county staff, not anything else, only partisan election judges. But we have to supply them. That's why we're doing this and recruiting them. We have to supply them. And by the way, when you're an election judge, you have to comply with the laws as they are written right then. So we're not allowed now to ask for somebody's ID when they come to vote. But if they offer it, you can use it. You just can't ask for it. But if they say, here's my ID, then they've offered it, and then you can, would be what I would understand. The law says you can't ask for it. So don't ask for it, or implicitly or in any way, shape, or form. But if they offer it and want to use it, that's a voter's decision that they are making. And there are other aspects of the law. So the big thing is you take an oath of office. When you become an election judge that morning, one of the first things you'll do is say, to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the state of Minnesota to the best of my ability. So that's your job. That's what you've got to do. And that was really brought home to me at that sense of that is your job, to uphold the laws in the precinct or in the absentee ballot board. Yes. Oh, okay. So you're just having me see you that you had a question.
Okay. Now, when your person registers to vote, that's when they have to show up. Don't they have to show an ID when they register to vote?
Well, now we're getting into the details of registering to vote, okay? But in the polling place on election day, if they are a challenged voter, and the word challenged for whatever reason is on the roster, that official list of registered voters. So if they're on that registered voter list, but the word challenged is there for whatever reason, then they need to go to the same day voter registration. They need to be treated as if they were registering to vote again. Okay? And so then there are requirements for them then. So when you register to vote, there are those requirements. When you fill out a voter registration application, remember, there you give your driver's license ID number or the last 4 digits of your social security number, or if you only have a Minnesota ID but not a driver's license, that Minnesota ID number. So you fill out that voter registration application form, and so that's where those requirements are. And then in the precinct on election day or at the county, if you're registering to vote or you are a challenged voter, then there's that process that you go through. Minnesota does not have a voter ID, photo ID requirement. We also do not have provisional ballots either. The nice thing about provisional ballots is that if there's a question about somebody's eligibility, they can cast a provisional ballot, and then there is time to verify and check things. Instead of doing it in the precinct on election day with lines standing in front of you, instead it can be set aside and then followed up later through that verification process. But we don't have that right now. So there's a lot of pressure in the precincts on election day. But remember, you have your training, and I'd encourage you to do your own study, prepare. Once you get that election judge training, it'll be quite a bit of time before you actually serve as an election judge. And so take those materials, maybe even get a group together, read through the election judge training guide, talk about it, ask questions with each other, maybe ask questions of the county election administrator or the city or the township. Make yourself a student. This is governing of the people, and make sure you are a well-qualified person that you want to do this. And it's like I taught bread making for many years in our local high school. Never judge how challenging it is. Sometimes the first time you do something, everything is so new. The first day on your job, the first day in a class compared to after you've been there a few days and you've done it a few times. You get to know it and you become more familiar with it, and then it gets a lot easier. And that's why the value is having election judges who return and do it after every year or every 2 years, whatever fits them. But it's really helpful to come back so that you become experienced and knowledgeable about it. But even if it's only one time, I will tell you this, that once you have done so, your appreciation for the whole process just goes sky high. And appreciate that. By the way, in this room, any of you here been an election judge before? Just raise your hand. Okay, how many of you are going to sign up today to be an election judge? I'm expecting that's why you came. Wonderful, great to see all those hands. Congratulations. It's a great thing to do. The people of Minnesota are blessed to be able to have those of you who are willing to step up into this role and be it. And I hope that I've added some information, but whatever you do, don't not do it because you're not sure or you're afraid you might not be able to do it quite right. There's going to be support going along the way. There's going to be other people in the precincts. There's going to be clerks and head election judges. There's going to be experienced people and new people. So step into it, step out, volunteer, be there, be part of America, that you are helping to support the system and do your part. And thank you very much for all your questions. One more.
Poll watchers, what's the procedure to become a poll watcher?
Poll watchers act on behalf of the Republican Party. I'm just going to do that for right now, or the Democrat Party. They have their own process. But you can sign up also through that same website to be a poll challenger as well. That's what Minnesota calls them. Other states call them a polling place observer. That is largely what it is. So in addition to the election judges, then you can have the presence of poll challengers on election day as well to observe the process, just another pair of eyes. And these can be from campaigns or they can be from a political party. By the way, when the polls close on election day, it's kind of exciting. I always thought it was exciting anyway. When you get done and the final tape is printed out of the results for the candidates, that's the fruit of your work, is getting that tape printed out on election night. Once the polls close and certain official things are completed, everybody's voted and so on, then anybody can come into the polling place and observe that process. They cannot be disruptive, they cannot interfere, and for heaven's sakes, don't do that. This is a time where those election judges need to do their process, give them room, give them space, and again, the admiration for watching them go through that whole process. Matter of fact, my policy is clasp your hands behind your back to just kind of help you be sure that you're observing only and being respectful of that process. No matter what you do, whether it's an official election judge or a poll challenger, always be respectful of the process and be appreciative to those who are working there. If you do observe something that you think is out of line, the state Republican Party will put out a hotline phone number that you can call into, and then it'll be handled in an official way. So you don't have to be the one at that time to necessarily have to take an action, but it is something that will be available for something that's more questionable that you're not sure about. Well, thank you all so much for coming, and I appreciate all the time you've given here today. Fortunately, it's a bit rainy and blustery when we're doing this today, so it makes it a little easier to be inside. So thank you very much, and I'll be available for any other questions afterwards as well. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you.